Imagine yourself a deckhand on a great square rigger of oak. There you be, far out on a fearful sea, enduring endless days of drudgery. Then comes a fresh breeze in the air, and a lone ship comes into view. It's a pirate ship, closing fast. On their flag you see the figure of death, dagger in one hand, an hourglass in the other. The hourglass says it all. Your time has run out. Filthy dogs, they cry. We'll tear your limb from limb, slit your throats, leave your bloody carcasses for the dogs. Your captain calls his men to arms, but all refuse. They've heard what happens to those who resist, the cruel, sadistic tortures, the capricious murders. Then, quick as the snap of a shark's jaws, the pirates are aboard. You watch and wait and pray as the pirates get down to business. Every passenger is a victim. Every piece of cargo is fair game. For the pirates live on loot of all kinds and on rum. The pirates celebrate, while the passengers cower in fear. Only when the drink runs out is it time for the pirates to go. Before they do, they turn to you, as they turned to me so many years ago. Come along, mate, they say. Will there be no more masters, nor drudgery, no cat o' nine tails? You'll have the same say as any Jack Tar man aboard. Come along, mate. We'll swing our cutlasses together for gold and silver and more. Aye, and there'll be rum and tobacco and grub aplenty. Music and laughter. Dusky maidens. What have you got to lose, eh? Come along, mate. Come along.
Pirate spirit that we all have. That spirit of excitement, adventure. So now let's do away with these shackles of modern civilization.
It's the annual Pirate Festival in Norfolk, Virginia. Revelers gather to relive an era of peg legs, parrots, and pieces of eight. These are the colorful, ageless images of pirate legend that have stirred our imagination since childhood.
Now, we English are practical people. I know it's...
Hollywood invented dashing pirates and daring adventures for the silver screen. But they pale by comparison to the exploits of the flesh and blood pirates. Here, in Britain's National Maritime Museum, the real pirates have become the most popular attraction in recent years. For the children, the pirates of old spring to life from the pages of history. Although the pirates vanished with little trace, their deeds and legacy changed the world. In pursuit of stolen riches, they made fantastic voyages and mapped parts of the globe never before seen by European eyes. The privateers raided for God and country, helping create one empire while bringing another to ruin. In a world of kings and subjects, the pirates were fiercely democratic, with their own Bill of Rights. The exploits of the pirates and privateers influenced the boundaries, the wealth, even the religions of the world we know today.
Not a bad legacy for a pack of scoundrels. William Dampier's the name. Explorer, naturalist, and let's just say, jack of all trades. 3 times I sailed around the world in the company of buccaneers, privateers, pirates. Listen to the names. Henry Morgan, Captain Kidd, Blackbeard, Black Bart, Calico Jack. Names that say hard-drinking, hard-fighting cutthroats. And I wrote about what I saw. But the Brotherhood is all-embracing, my friend. Including not only a few women, men you would not think of as sea raiders. Governor Woodes Rogers, Admiral John Paul Jones, and a God-fearing, patriotic man who was one of England's greatest heroes. His name? Sir Francis Drake, Knight of the Realm. Before that, he was simply Francis Drake, pirate.
It is 1554. All Europe is racked by storms of religious conflict as nation fights nation, pitting neighbor against neighbor. In Plymouth, England, a young Protestant boy learns of friends and family being tried before Catholic tribunals. Most are tortured and burned at the stake. Francis Drake, seaman, explorer, and privateer, would remember always the horrors of those years. Somewhere off the coast of Peru, aboard the Golden Hind, it is prayer time. If this is an unlikely scene aboard a pirate ship, its captain is an unlikely pirate. Francis Drake is on a secret mission for his queen. He knows that to stop Catholic Spain, he must sever its endless supply of gold and silver from the New World. Queen Elizabeth has not given her official approval. The letter of marque, which will justify Drake's actions in the service of his country. If he is captured, he may be hanged as a pirate.
A letter of marque was simply a license to steal. It in fact authorized the captain of a ship to attack the ships of a foreign nation or a hostile nation, and every pirate wanted to get their hands on one because it authorized their actions.
It's been a terrible voyage, marked by starvation, scurvy, and mutiny. A journey across the Atlantic through the perilous Straits of Magellan and north up the coast of South America to Peru. Francis Drake urges his weary men on, insisting the ship's officers work hand in hand with the crew.
Let us show ourselves all to be of a company. If this voyage should not have good success, we should not only be scorned by our enemies, but also a great blot to the whole country forever.
He's heard reports ashore that somewhere up ahead is a Spanish galleon laden with treasure. But can he find it before provisions run out, before the wind fails, the crew turns against him? By right of her voyages of discovery, Spain now claims the New World as her own. After only 35 years, she rules an empire that stretches from Mexico across South America to the Pacific. From native peoples of the New World, the Spanish conquistadors have stolen a staggering treasure of religious relics and melted them down into gold and silver ingots to finance Europe's holy wars. Ruled by Philip II, Spain is the largest empire in the Western world. Philip is a man of iron determination. His dream is to bring all of Europe back to the Catholic Church.
God, in his wisdom, will raise up an instrument for triumph of this cause.
Philip, of course, sees himself as that instrument. But he will meet his match in the red-haired Protestant queen. Elizabeth, intelligent and untiring, is the consummate stateswoman.
I have as good a courage as my father ever had. I am your anointed queen.
Elizabeth watched very closely as Philip's armies consolidated their hold on the southern Netherlands from the 1570s, because she knew that once he had suppressed the Dutch resistance, then he would use it as a base to invade England and drag England back to Catholic obedience.
But Francis Drake will strike first at Philip's treasure fleet. Aboard the Golden Hind, a lookout spots what appears to be a cloud on the horizon. Could this be La Señora de la Concepcion, the treasure ship they've been seeking? It's a much larger ship than the Golden Hind. Who knows how many soldiers and cannons protect her? He must keep his prize from slipping away.
Incredibly, Drake found his treasure ship, La Señora de la Concepcion, which his crew nicknamed the Cacafuego. Translated, caca, dung in Spanish, fuego, fire, the dung fire. A slow merchant ship. In order to look like a slow merchant ship himself, Drake towed warps. He threw lines over the stern, dragging buckets, so that it took him 9 hours to catch up with the vessel, by which time the Spanish commander was convinced that it was just another slow Spanish merchantman, and by the time he found out otherwise, it was too late.
Clad in armor for the battle ahead, Drake slowly approaches his prey. When at last the two ships come within hailing distance, the Spanish captain yells out, "What ship?" Francis Drake answers in style. The single volley sends all but their captain below in terror. The victorious Drake admires the captain's valor and invites him aboard.
When the Spanish captain came aboard Drake's vessel, Drake treated him very well. He was known for his kindness to his prisoners. And he consoled him by saying, "It's the fortunes of war," and gave him gifts when they parted eventually. The treasure that he had taken was fantastic. It was the greatest thing that had ever been seen. Nobody had expected it. 14 chests of silver coins, 80 pounds of gold, and 26 tons of bar silver from the mines of Peru. Enough treasure to run the English government for a year. The effect, of course, on Spain was the reverse. Philip II was deprived of it, and Queen Elizabeth had won a fantastic coup.
In the week it takes to transfer the wealth of the Cacafuego to the Golden Hind, Drake and Captain Anton speak frequently. Drake reminds the Spaniard that this is no act of piracy, but part of a holy war against Philip of Spain.
Francis Drake offered the galleon's black slaves to come on board and join him at the same pay as the rest of his own crew. And in a sense, it was an act of repentance that he made, because earlier in his life he'd been a black slave trader, and it was something he wasn't too happy about.
Drake not only spares the Spanish captain's life, but allows him to keep his ship.
He gave me safe conduct in English signed with his name, so that the other English ships would not rob me again.
In setting the Spanish captain free, Drake knows the Spanish will be lying in wait if he retraces his course back through the Straits of Magellan. If captured, he and his crew will either burn as heretics or hang as pirates. And so, in a daring move, Drake heads west, across the vast unknown waters of the Pacific. It is a bold decision. No one except Magellan's crew had ever succeeded in sailing around the world. Navigators of the time could not calculate longitude, distances east or west. It would take the invention of reliable clocks 200 years later to solve the problem. They knew latitude, how far north and south they were, by the height of the sun at noon or the North Star at twilight. But there was no way to know how wide the Great Pacific was. How many days and how much food and water would it take to cross? With little to guide him but simple charts filled with childlike drawings, Drake will navigate the vast stretch of unknown sea. His men have already been at sea for almost 2 years. Privately, they talk of ships sunk by giant fish and frightening sea monsters. Will they starve without fresh winds to move them on? Will they ever see England again? Can Drake bring them home? On September 26, 1580, fishermen in the English Channel see a small, heavily laden ship approaching Plymouth Sound. As it passes, its captain hails the fishermen.
Does the Queen live?
She does, sir, and is in good health.
After a perilous voyage of 3½ years and some 30,000 miles, Francis Drake returns home, laden with treasure.
The treasure. Before it was squirreled away in the Tower of London, Drake was allowed to skim 10,000 pounds off the top, another 14,000 for his crew. Altogether, in modern terms, that has buying power of perhaps $250,000. The investors were later paid anywhere between 1 to 50 to 1 to 1,000. So many different estimates were made as to how much money was brought back. We really don't know. It was enough to fund the foundation of the East India Company for England, which made money forever after for the country.
But Philip of Spain is not amused.
It is a thing that terrifies one, the boldness of this low man.
To the outrage of the Spanish court, Elizabeth publicly honors Drake. Holding the sword with which she will knight him, she says,
Master Drake, the King of Spain has asked for your head, and here we have the weapon with which to remove it.
From now on, the Queen will refer to Sir Francis Drake affectionately as my pirate. His single act of piracy inspires thousands of English sea dogs to sail as privateers, foreshadowing a golden age of piracy.
For the next 2 centuries, thousands will plunder the seas in the name of God and country. For England and pirate alike, it was a pact with the devil. Aye, but it is a dangerous game, for the devil always gets his due.
For hours, the bells of Holland have been ringing in alarm. A firestorm is sweeping the country. The flaming swords of Philip of Spain's victorious armies. Will England be next? No one sees the coming invasion more clearly than Francis Drake. He prepares to send Queen Elizabeth a letter containing an urgent plea.
I dare not almost write unto your honor of the great forces we hear of the King of Spain. prepare in England strongly, and most by sea. Stop him now, and stop him ever.
Now wealthy from the spoils of his piracy and a national hero, Sir Francis Drake has purchased a former monastery called Buckland Abbey. Here, this son of a humble preacher lives in grandeur. Still, the trappings of success do little to soothe his restless nature. Drake becomes mayor of Plymouth, then member of Parliament, living the words of his motto, "Great achievements from small beginnings." He's well aware of the turmoil in Europe, as Catholic Spain is determined to crush the Protestant Netherlands at last.
Philip II had a remarkable streak of good fortune. His cousin, the King of Portugal, died without an heir, leaving Philip both his throne and his navy. William the Silent of the Netherlands has been assassinated, leaving the Dutch rebels without a leader. Only Elizabeth, Queen of England, stands in the way of Philip's dreams of empire.
Though considered by many to be a prince of darkness, Philip has long been obsessed with light. Having studied the interplay of light and mysterious symbols to predict the future, he makes the most fateful decision of his life. As if the world were a giant chessboard, Philip plans his next move. He will launch a mighty armada against Elizabeth's England.
The infestation of the English forces us to apply the fire in their homeland.
Philip dreams of seeing England's Protestant heretics burn in the righteous fires of the Inquisition. Increasingly alarmed, Drake petitions Elizabeth to allow him to attack Philip's fleet, this time in Spain's own waters. His scheme is to pillage and burn the supplies destined for the Spanish Armada, thus saving country, queen, and their Protestant beliefs. On March 15, 1587, Elizabeth signs Drake's new commission. He is instructed to impede the flow of ships and supplies to Spain.
The wind commands me away. Our ship is under sail. Let me beseech your honor to pray unto God that he will direct us the right way. Haste.
In fact, he moves so hastily that when he nears Cadiz, Spain, he does not wait to see how many enemy ships are in the harbor, how many cannon guard its entrance. The headstrong Drake bears down on his enemies like one possessed. Under cover of darkness, his ships slip into the harbor, which is crowded with vessels bearing provisions for the Armada. The English approach the great ships, sack them, and put them to the torch, setting the night ablaze. A merchant remembers.
With the pitch and tar they had, smoke and flames rose up, so that it seemed like a huge volcano, or something out of hell.
As quickly as they came, Drake and his men are gone, just before the arrival of some 6,000 Spanish troops. For Philip, it is another humiliating defeat. Still, he betrays some admiration.
The loss was not very great, but the daring was great.
In fact, the loss was very great indeed. For in the flames of Cadiz burned thousands of these wooden staves, used to make the barrels that carry the food and water for the Armada. To survive at sea, we depended on well-made, well-seasoned barrels. But Philip of Spain was a landlubber, and so found it hard to imagine that the loss of such lowly things could soon come back to haunt him.
Exhilarated as Drake feels about the victory, he sees it as simply a beginning and continues his bold raids up the coast of Spain and Portugal. As he fills his coffers with treasure from Philip's ships, he fills his countrymen with pride and confidence. Drake's raids have merely postponed the inevitable. Almost a year to the day, the inevitable comes. Philip's plan is to send his armada up the Channel to escort a massive invasion force from the continent. For the first time in 500 years, England is threatened with invasion. This time, by one of the mightiest empires in history. On August 18, 1588, the Queen insists on traveling to her troops.
Let tyrants fear, I am come amongst you. I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and the stomach of a king, and a king of England too.
Imagine the might of Philip's armada. 130 ships, 19,000 soldiers, 8,000 sailors, 1,000 gentlemen volunteers, 6,000 monks and priests, 2,000 heretic slaves, and God knows how many servants. It was the mightiest fleet of its time. But Elizabeth of England had even more. She had her pirate.
Plymouth Harbor. As they have every Saturday beyond memory, members of the local lawn bowling club are engaged in a rousing match. It is from here that Philip's armada first came into view over 300 years ago. At the time, another fierce competitor was bowling on the green. His name, Sir Francis Drake. When asked why he was not hurrying to meet the Spanish fleet,
there is plenty of time to finish the game, and beat the Spaniards too.
Drake led the attack, and he moved in on the Armada, and he captured a galleon, and then the Armada moved up the Channel, and there were a series of inconclusive actions. And at the end of a week, only 5 Spanish ships had actually been sunk by British gunfire, and what did for the Armada was the weather. It was the autumn gales and the tides, and that finished them off.
As the Armada approaches the west coast of Ireland, the wind grows into a mighty tempest. Now, the true damage from Drake's raid on Cadiz is finally understood.
The barrel staves Drake burned in Cadiz were seasoned and ready for use, so the Spaniards had to make their barrels from greenwood. When they were filled, the juices leached out of the wood and into the food, creating a dangerous brew. The Spaniards grew deathly ill. Too weak to man their ships in the storms that hurled them against the Irish coast. Too weak to fight off the English soldiers who found them washed up on the rocky shores. Too weak to ask their God with their dying breaths why once again they'd been forsaken. "60
ships are lost in the storm. On hearing the death toll has reached 15,000, Philip writes,
"If God does not send us a miracle, I hope to die and go to him, so as not to see so much ill fortune and disgrace.
There will be no miracle. No invasion of England. Drake has spared his nation's shores from the Spanish threat. But the Queen's pirate would never relent in his war against Philip. 6 years later, he sails for the far Caribbean to raid the cities of the Spanish Main. While still at sea, he falls desperately ill. Knowing the end is near, the old sea dragon orders a change of course, dresses in his armor, and alerts the ship's drummer. He will greet death itself, prepared for battle.
The 28th of January 1595, being Wednesday in the morning. Sir Francis Drake died of the bloody flux. 6 leagues at sea. He now resteth with the Lord.
The drum that announced his burial at sea now rests in Drake's home in Buckland Abbey. They say it can be heard whenever England is threatened, as if Drake himself is reminding his countrymen. Take my drum to England, hang it by the shore, strike it when your powder's running low. If the dawn sight Devon, I'll quit the port of heaven and drum them up the channel as we drummed them long ago. In the mid-16th century, Ireland is ruled by clans led by powerful chieftains. Even as England fights Spain for control of the seas, she seeks to bring all of Ireland under her dominion. On this island nation, its wild coasts surrounded by treacherous seas, the fiercely independent Irish still live by farming, fishing, seafaring, and trading. But these traditional trades are being choked off as England attempts to crush the old Gaelic ways and spirit. Battles and rebellions rage as the English fight to subjugate the chieftains and claim their lands. Already the English control port cities like Galway. They impose crippling taxes, and in a crowning insult, literally wall the native Irish people out. For the Irish clans, there is little choice but clandestine trade and smuggling. As for taxes, they will levy their own on trading ships en route to Galway. Some call it piracy. And few are more expert at it than Grace O'Malley. Known in the Gaelic of her time as Grania or Granuel. The daughter of a wealthy chieftain, this daring woman has rebelled against English policies to become the most notorious pirate on Ireland's west coast.
The O'Malleys, with their galleys along our coasts, have taken sundry ships and barks bound for this poor town, which they have rifled to the utter overthrow of the owners and merchants.
Her galleys are small and swift, like Viking longboats. Her clever tactics and disciplined crew win her riches and renown. Her legend endures to this day.
There were few women aboard pirate ships. To the brethren, they were considered bad luck. Truth be, the men had enough trouble getting along as it was. For a woman like Grenwale to lead the pirates, she had to know the temper of the winds and the temper of her men. She had to prove herself a better hand in every way than her shipmates. Times have changed, I imagine.
Her father was a sea merchant, so one evening he decided that he wanted to travel to Spain, and he went to the top of the mountain to look out onto the sea so that he could prophesy the weather. One of the traits of the Irish chieftains was to prophesy the weather. And Grania was only 8 at the time, and she followed him up the hill. And she also looked out over the sea to see that if she could recognize what was coming. Grania told him that there was thunder on the way, but he didn't believe her. And sure enough, when he did look out, he could see the clouds gathering, the black clouds gathering, and yes, there was thunder on the way. And he suspected for ages that she was given the gift of the weather prophecy. And he was afraid for her because no woman had become chieftain of a clan.
Soon it's apparent that Granuaile not only understands the wind and sea, but is a born leader. It is she who will captain her father's fleet. In time, Grania marries a rich chieftain named Richard Burke. They move here to Rockfleet Castle. 4 stories high, it is said its exterior walls were sanded so smooth her enemies couldn't climb them. Rockfleet was built to withstand siege. Her living quarters had stone floors, since there was always a danger an enemy might torch the castle. Local lore has it her bedchamber had a hole cut in the wall. She slept with a line attached from her toe to her ship to alert her immediately should anyone try to steal it. From here, she held a commanding view of Clew Bay and the sea beyond, where she launched her daring raids. As leader of a seafaring clan, even pregnancy did not deter her from leading her fleet of galleys and men.
There came to me a most famous feminine sea captain named Grania O'Malley, who offered the services of 3 galleys and 200 fighting men. She brought with her her husband, for she was on land as at sea more than simply Mrs. Mate to him.
Indeed she was. It was she who ran the family business. By now, she was famous throughout Ireland.
It wasn't a pirate way to take lives if you didn't have to. And Granuaile was no exception. When she boarded a prize, she wanted booty, not bodies. Besides, why ruffle the feathers of the English if you didn't have to? She ruffled them anyway, for England wanted to rule the whole roost, including Ireland. So Granuaile, the pirate queen, was captured and caged.
Grania is clapped into Limerick jail and later sent to the rat-infested dungeons of Dublin Castle. Hearing little news from the outside world, she can only pray her family is safe. Held for a year and a half, Grania is released on a promise not to oppose the English, a promise she will not, cannot keep. The Irish rebellions continue. Queen Elizabeth appoints Richard Bingham as governor. Cruel, treacherous, and deceitful, he covets the O'Malley's land and livestock. Bingham's troops attack the O'Malley castle. Crops are destroyed, livestock stolen, Men, women, and children are killed. Among the dead is Grania's eldest son.
One night, my son Owen and 18 others were guarding their kettle when Bingham's men approached. They were given food and drink by my son, and all seemed well. But then Bingham claimed my son was a traitor to the crown. So he took 4,000 cows, 500 horses, and 1,000 sheep. Bingham hanged my son and his friends. Hanged without trial or good cause. My Owen, cruelly murdered.
Grania's world has been shattered, and a way of life is finished. The days when Granuaile can rule the seas from her castle are over. Within a year, Bingham captures her other son and her brother. Grania must now reach accommodation. But never, never with Richard Bingham. Granuaile, Queen of Pirates, will go to Elizabeth, Queen of England, to plead for the release of her brother and son. Few Irish chieftains would dare set foot on English soil, much less a known rebel. But Grania will not be swayed. Hearing of her departure, Bingham sends a dispatch to Elizabeth.
This Grania O'Malley has been a rebel since childhood. She is continually fighting. We know more than enough about her and her rebels to hang them with justice.
They say Granuaile sailed right up to the door of Greenwich Castle itself. Imagine this weathered woman in a long Irish cloak, coming down the corridors filled with effete princes, fragile ladies in their exquisite dress, shining jewels and powdered hair. But Elizabeth did not see a rough-hewn pirate. No. She saw a kindred spirit.
To the dismay of her advisors, Elizabeth grants Grania O'Malley a private audience. We know little about the meeting except since Elizabeth knows no Gaelic and Grania speaks no English, it is conducted in classic Latin. The two women establish an immediate rapport. Perhaps they see reflected in each other the same courage and resourcefulness that has made them leaders in a world dominated by men. The Queen agrees to release Grania's son and brother. And more surprising, she will require Richard Bingham to compensate Grania for her losses. Granuaile, in return, agrees to stop her rebellious ways and to fight the Queen's enemies at sea. Eventually, she will slip quietly back into her life of maintenance by the sea, as she calls it, and continue her seafaring until she is 70 years old, when she retires to Rockfleet Castle. In her long life, she has seen the powers of the Gaelic clans extinguished, but not their Irish spirit. As for Granuaile, her name lives on in song and legend, echoing across the Irish seas. Today, a small boat ferries customers across Clew Bay.
That's okay.
The ferry is run by Charles O'Malley, descendant of Granuel and the O'Malley clan.
How does it feel to be at the wheel?
He is teaching his daughter Gina the ways of the sea.
Do you think would you be able to take it out yourself now the next day?
It is said young Gina is a deft hand at the wheel and can weather a storm with the best of them. And it appears she has a certain gift, an uncanny ability to predict the weather. Tunis, North Africa, on the Barbary coast. A place that once struck fear in the hearts of Englishmen. Today, as then, Tunis is a bazaar of exotic sights and sounds. In these back alleys unfolded the plots of Barbary pirates called corsairs. Their ghosts still linger here. But our story begins in Portsmouth, England. Both Queen Elizabeth and King Philip have passed into eternity, and the long years of war between Spain and England have ended in quiet truce. In a smoky tavern, an old privateer named John Ward thinks fondly of days gone by.
Where are the days that have been, and the seasons that we have seen, when we might sing, swear, drink, drab, and kill men as freely as men do flies? And the whole sea was our empire, where we robbed at will, and the world but a garden where we walked for sport.
John Ward had been a privateer, a private sailor given permission by the English king to raid the ships of his nation's enemy, Spain. But when peace came, privateering was outlawed. Now, in the summer of 1603, English ports are swollen with idle sailors. Aristocrats have been given commissions in the Royal Navy, but common folk, once considered loyal servants to the crown, are seen as unruly, unwanted troublemakers. Peace has made the privateers expendable. John Ward was one of them, a captain without a command, and so he joined the King's Navy as a lowly seaman. It was a humiliating experience for the old captain. Ward and his disgruntled mates steal a small sailboat. Off the English coast, they encounter a large French merchant ship. Suddenly, his men are scurrying aboard. Just as quickly, the ship is theirs. They set the French crew adrift and take the prize ship as their own. Now, with a well-armed crew and a fine ship, the world will once again be John Ward's garden. But since he has turned pirate, the doors of his homeland, England, are closed to him. He cannot turn back. Lured by images of warm waters, snug harbors, and a long history of welcoming pirates, John Ward and his men head for the Barbary coast of North Africa. For Ward and his hard-drinking English pirates, the exotic port of Tunis is a world apart.
Every pirate in every time needs someone to buy stolen booty, furnish supplies and provide protection. Land pirates. In Tunis it was the Turkish commander, Kara Osman. God, he drove a hard bargain. But he did keep the lads in booze and strumpets, which for every pirate in every time was always a good deal.
From their new home in Tunis, Ward and his pirates raid the Mediterranean. Within a short time, he commands a fleet of 10 ships. His prey, the vessels of Venice, Holland, Spain, and Malta. Soon, the seas of North Africa are swarming with former English privateers, sporting the turbans and swords of the Barbary pirates. Turning Turk, as they call it, is a small price to pay for the adventure, wealth, and power opened up to the English cast-offs. Soon, word reaches Tunis that the pillars of English society are outraged at the pirates' heathen ways. One member of Parliament writes John Ward a letter.
As your countryman and as a Christian, I remind you of the incumbent pain in the world to come for every sensuous pleasure in this life. I promise to do the utmost in my power to make peace with all the people you have harmed, if only you would come in and bear arms with your fellow Christian against the Turks. You may be able to triumph with your chains of gold, your jewels of pearl, your precious stones and other riches won by theft and the spoil of others. But how can you boast of freedom when your sense, body, and mind are servile to your own sensuality?
But for John Ward, at this stage of his career, the good Christian life is not enticing. He settles into sumptuous quarters, described by a Scottish traveler.
He built a stately palace more fit for prince than pirate. He is guarded by 12 Turks always standing by his door. His respect is such among the Turks that he is made equal to a Turk commander.
Yet in his heart, Ward is still an Englishman. Alone in Tunisia, he misses the English wife he's been supporting all these years. Trapped in this strange, stark land, he also simply misses English green. But Ward is about to get another lesson in the English class system. England's new king, James, has issued a royal pardon to another pirate, Henry Mainwaring, for a price. John Ward sends word to the king. He, too, will pay for a pardon.
Unlike Ward, Mainwaring was an aristocrat. He was a sprig of the aristocracy who was given a ship at an early age and sent out to catch pirates in the English Channel. He didn't find them. So, not wanting to waste his opportunities, he went out, found Spanish ships, plenty of them. Also some Portuguese ships, French ships, Dutch ships. By the time he was done, he'd been so successful he had to petition the King of England for a pardon, which the king was willing to grant him on the condition that Mainwaring would come back to England, become a captain in the British Navy, and chase pirates. This Mainwaring did so effectively that he drove them out of the English Channel.
Having turned against the pirates, the aristocratic Mainwaring even writes a book on the origins and suppression of piracy. It contains harsh recommendations for dealing with his former shipmates.
To take away the pirates' hopes and encouragements, your highness must put on a constant resolution never to grant any pardon, and for those that are taken, to put them all to death or make slaves of them.
King James takes this advice to heart and ends pardons for pirates, except for the sons of aristocrats. For the fisherman's son, John Ward, there will be no pardon. Ward is furious at the king and his council.
You can tell those flat caps that before I am done with them, I will make them beg me for a pardon.
If England doesn't want him, then he'll stay where he is and show the English what turning Turk really means. Ward takes to the seas with vengeance, this time with English ships as his prey. Embracing the Muslim religion and culture, he changes his name to Yusuf Rees. He even undergoes, at the age of 55, the Muslim ritual of circumcision.
And so we can imagine, while Henry Mainwaring was sipping English tea in his London mansion, John Ward was sipping Turkish coffee in his Tunisian palace. And while Henry Mainwaring was dining on steak and kidneys, John Ward savoured couscous and lamb. And while Henry Mainwaring bedded down with a proper English wife, John Ward snuggled with an exotic Arab harem. Not a bad life for the son of a fisherman.
Knowing he can never return home, Ward relaxes into a life of luxury. In 1616, a Scottish traveller writes,
Here in Tunis I met an English captain, General Ward, once a great pirate, with whom I found some 15 circumcised English renegades. Old Ward, their master, was quite agreeable.
And so the old pirate lives out his life using his money and influence to free Englishmen enslaved by the Moors. From those he saves, he earns a proud title he will carry to his grave. Not pirate, not Turk, but generous John Ward. The days of high-spirited English pirates on the Barbary coast will soon disappear. But a new hotspot will soon emerge, as England makes a bid for supremacy in the Caribbean. And instead of hundreds of pirates, there will be thousands, more fierce than any the coast of North Africa has ever seen. Although Spain and England have declared peace across the seas in Europe, skirmishes continue on Spain's vast holdings in the New World. Throughout the Caribbean, Spain has established fortifications to protect her possessions. Jealous of her colonies, she will allow no foreign nations to approach them. But in 1654, when the Puritan Oliver Cromwell comes to power in England, he declares war against Spain. With designs on the riches of the Caribbean, Cromwell sends an expeditionary force of some 7,000 men to establish a stronghold there. Among them is a young Welshman, Henry Morgan. Born of a proud and honorable family, he dreams of glory and knighthood, but he will surrender both pride and honor to command an army of barbarous buccaneers.
Cromwell sent an army from England to invade the Spanish island of Hispaniola. The young Henry Morgan, raised in a soldier's family, was a member of this expedition. He would see a great deal of bloody action in the Caribbean.
Cromwell's forces are defeated in Hispaniola, so they turn to Jamaica and take the island with little resistance. Jamaica is perfectly situated to raid the Spanish Main. At the crossroads of Spain's shipping routes, It is within striking distance of her settlements. On its southern coast, a narrow spit of land forms a magnificent natural harbor. At its tip lies Port Royal, soon to become notorious as the wickedest city on earth. Port Royal is home to 44 taverns, numerous gambling houses, and countless prostitutes. A newly arrived cleric notes,
"This town is the Sodom of the New World. My stay there was of no use, and I could better preach the word of God elsewhere, among a better sort of folk."
He leaves by the same ship that brought him. Most of the inhabitants are drunkards, scoundrels, and rogues known as buccaneers. Because they have too few soldiers, the English have invited them here to protect Jamaica. In return, the authorities issue privateering licenses and look away as they live by legalized piracy. The buccaneers are simply loose bands of rough renegades. But Henry Morgan, ever the opportunist, will unite them and lead them to a bloody destiny. John Alexander Esquemeling would chronicle their exploits in his first-hand account, Buccaneers of America. Like many of them, Esquemeling, a Dutchman, had come to the Caribbean as an indentured servant. Eventually, in desperation, he joined the Buccaneers. For years, the Buccaneers lived peacefully on nearby Hispaniola. Sailors, runaway criminals, many having escaped life as plantation slaves. The Buccaneers survived by hunting wild pigs and cattle left behind by Spanish settlers. The meat is slow cured on a grill called a bucan, from which the Buccaneers take their name. When Spanish troops set out to reclaim the island's interior, the Buccaneers, hounded relentlessly, take to the sea once again, this time as predators, prowling the Caribbean in anything that floats. Their new prey is plentiful, the ships of the Spanish Main. Across the Caribbean, Spanish sailors are overwhelmed by foul-looking men in blood-stained leather, brandishing cutlasses. Armed with 6-foot muskets, skilled from years of practice shooting animals, the Buccaneers are dead shots at 200 yards. There are thousands of these renegades, who now call themselves the Brethren of the Coast. For 10 years, Henry Morgan fights alongside the Buccaneers, raiding and sacking Spanish colonial cities. Raids commissioned by Jamaican authorities for profit as well as protection. Morgan's courage and daring earn him the rank of colonel.
To Henry Morgan, there was always a noble reason for his expeditions. This time there were rumors of a Spanish fleet gathering to invade Jamaica. He was no common buccaneer, not Colonel Morgan. Nope, he was a soldier defending his country. There are times I think he may have truly believed it.
In 1668, Morgan and his buccaneers sailed from Jamaica with a commission to spy on Spain's forces in Portobello. Located on the Caribbean side of Panama, Portobello is the storehouse for Spain's treasure in the New World. And Colonel Morgan knows, to keep his buccaneers happy, he must bring back plunder. He will attack the city. 2 heavily armed forts stand at the harbor's entrance. Their cannon guard yet another fort and the town that lies beyond. But these defenses are no match for Henry Morgan, a supreme tactician.
His attack on Portobello was strictly by the book, but he had written the book. He knew that by sailing to the mouth of the harbor, the Spaniards would be deluded into believing that he was going to attack by sea. But Captain Morgan had prepared a wickedly devious diversion.
Unknown to the Spaniards, Morgan and his men have landed on a beach over the mountains from Portobello. To take the Spaniards by surprise will require a trek of 30 miles through the jungle. Their course is set. They will attack by land. Because they know that Portobello is heavily fortified, some of the buccaneers are hesitant. Morgan appeals to their greed.
If our numbers are small, our hearts are great. The fewer we are, the better shares we shall have of the spoils.
As dawn breaks, the buccaneers quietly approach a garrison located near a monastery. Before the sentries can sound the alarm, Morgan's men surround it. The garrison is poorly armed against land attack, and it quickly falls. The buccaneers swarm toward the fort of San Geronimo. Morgan orders his men to make ladders to scale the walls. To position them, he uses nuns and priests from the monastery. Esquemeling was there.
These religious persons were forced to raise the ladders to the walls. Many were killed before they could fix the ladders.
Even by the conventions of war, it is a callous act. But Morgan will claim it was necessary to save the lives of his men. The final assault by the buccaneers is too much for the Spanish defenders. Only 18 English are killed and 35 wounded. Portobello is theirs. The most important men of Portobello are locked in a room of the fort, their ladies in another, and the Spanish wounded in a third.
After Morgan had taken Portobello, 11 English prisoners were discovered in the dungeons there. These prisoners had apparently been both starved and beaten, which explains in large measure why the English took it out on the Spaniards.
In a chilling reference, Esquemeling describes the torture inflicted to make the Spaniards surrender their valuables.
This they performed with such cruelty that many of them died upon the rock, or presently after.
Harry Morgan employed one of the most sophisticated yet simple devices of all time. He called it wolding. A thin cord was wrapped around the victim's temples and then tightened and tightened until the victim chose to speak. A particularly stubborn victim, however, would find his eyeballs shooting out of his head like a pair of grapes.
In our day, cruelty was everywhere. It was the so-called civilized who burned the flesh of heretics, strung up pickpockets. Lords and ladies removed the tongues of gossips, cracked the bones of debtors. The Spaniards, Henry Morgan said, were treated no worse than any other enemy. Such were the wages of war. And so, Henry Morgan left Portobello with gold and glory, but he left behind pain and death, and yet another piece of his soul.
As the plaza echoes with screams of the tortured, Morgan and his men strip Portobello of everything they can pry loose. Finally, Morgan demands 100,000 pieces of 8, or he will burn the town and kill his prisoners. The governor of Panama is forced to relent. Morgan departs, the dutiful soldier, and a very rich man. He returns home to Port Royal. There, the boisterous citizens give him a hero's welcome, a pale reminder of his youthful dreams of glory. Still, Henry Morgan has led the most daring and profitable raid ever attempted by any buccaneer. For 15 years, Henry Morgan has ruled the Caribbean, sweeping through like a hurricane. His specter holds the Spanish in the grip of fear. Portobello, Maracaibo. Where will the ruthless Morgan strike next? In 1669, off Ile-de-Vache, Hispaniola, Morgan has sent out the call for buccaneers. A force of 900 has assembled here to decide on their next target. Aboard Morgan's flagship, the Oxford, the names of many Spanish targets are bandied about. But it is Cartagena that gets the vote. While Morgan's captains celebrate in his cabin, the buccaneers carouse on deck.
They drank many healths and discharged many guns, as is a common sign of mirth among seamen.
Suddenly, in one terrible moment, the party is over. In a flash, hunks of ship and bits of men fly into the air and crash into the sea. Almost everyone on board is killed.
Fiery rum, lighted candles, dancing pirates and open kegs of gunpowder. And they say no one knows what caused the explosion. Of the 200 men aboard, only 10 survived. The rest were burned or drowned. Henry Morgan survived without a scratch. It seems the guards were telling him it was time to lie low. And so, after one more raid, he retired to his wife and plantation in Jamaica. To a world that seemed at peace at last.
But unknown to Morgan, Spain has declared war on the English West Indies and put out the call for privateers. Only one man answers the challenge, a young merchant captain named Pedro Manuel Rivera Pardal. He is a strange man, proud, poetic, patriotic, and something of a romantic. With a crew of 70 men, Rivera sets sail aboard the San Pedro y la Fama, seeking his own fame and glory. His first raid is at Grand Cayman Island, which has been settled by English renegades and pirates. The action is successful, and Rivera boasts about it in a poem he has composed himself.
Across the waves sail we, across the surging sea, to the Isles of Cayman where there's havoc in the air. The pirate lairs aflame all tremble at my name.
Flush with victory, Rivera Pardal sets out for fresh glory. He encounters a Jamaican ship under the command of an English privateer, Captain Bart. Rivera has 70 men, Captain Bart only 18, buccaneers. armed to the teeth. Rivera boldly issues a challenge.
Defend yourself, dog. I come as punishment for heretics.
The Buccaneers close in for the kill.
The tactic was to get as close to you as they could, as quickly as they could get there, and bring into play their long-range muskets, their fusils boucaniers, famous in history. They could pick off people through an open gun port, as was recorded a number of times. Then they came closer yet, bringing the ship within range of their big shotguns, the swivel cannons, that lined the rails, firing blasts of musket balls and birdshot. And the smaller artillery, the blunderbusses, big bore guns. Finally, just as their ship ground against yours, the next thing that you would probably experience would be a rain of grenades, hollow cast iron spheres loaded with 5 ounces of black powder that would blow up with a tremendous roar and send death in all directions. Then, through the smoke, came the steel. Cutlasses, a cut and thrust weapon, relatively short blade for handiness in a melee, a close-pressed group of men. Your best weapon of defense were your boarding pikes, simple spears, 8 to 10 feet long, with no obstruction to hang up in the rigging if you were thrusting.
The Buccaneers kill a third of the Spanish, but heavily outnumbered, they are eventually defeated. Captain Bart is killed, his ship taken by Rivera Pardal. To celebrate his triumph and show off his prize, Rivera sails to Cartagena, the city that Morgan had planned to attack. Cartagena holds a great fiesta in Rivera Pardal's honor. For one brief and shining moment, the Spanish Main as its hero. Rivera Pardal, his blood up, now heads to Jamaica itself, cruises the coastline, and makes several strikes. He burns a handful of shacks, steals a few chickens, and on a lone palm tree, he posts a challenge.
I, Captain Manuel Rivera Pardal, am he that took Captain Bart, and now I am arrived to this coast and have burned it. I am come to seek Henry Morgan, and I crave he would come out upon the coast and face me, that he might see the true valor of the Spaniards.
In Port Royal, word of Rivera's challenge sparks rumors of invasion. Now the Jamaican authorities have an excuse for action against Spain. Morgan is summoned from retirement. He is appointed Admiral and Commander-in-Chief of Jamaican forces, with permission to land in the enemy's country as he shall judge needful. Morgan now has the authority he needs to attack the treasure house of the Spanish Main. He declares,
all of us conclude that it stands most for the good of Jamaica and safety of us all to take Panama.
Then word reached Morgan that King Charles of England was about to sign a treaty with Spain. The treaty required that all buccaneering raids had to stop. Morgan knew that the great raid on Panama was now or never.
Admiral Morgan assembles his attack force off the coast of Jamaica. More than 2,000 men. It's the largest gathering of buccaneers in history. As Morgan waits for the last reinforcements to join his fleet, one ship, on its way to the rendezvous, seeks shelter from a storm in a small bay. It is trapped by the vessel of Rivera Pardal. But this time, there will be no battle for glory. no poem of triumph, no celebration for the extravagant heroics of Captain Pedro Manuel Rivera Pardal.
The last fireworks he would see came from the barrel of a buccaneer's musket. Rivera Pardal was killed instantly, and so passed away the sole outlaw hero of the Spanish Main. When the Spaniards saw their captain fall, they jumped into the sea. There they were easy targets for those that were hunters of animals before they were hunters of men.
Rivera Pardal had served Henry Morgan's ambitions well. Now, Morgan dreams of marching into Panama at the head of the largest army he has ever commanded. In the winter of 1671, a fleet of 38 ships leaves Jamaica under the command of Admiral Henry Morgan. Nearly every buccaneer in the West Indies has answered the call, a tribute to Morgan's leadership and reputation. Their target is the legendary city of Panama, heart of the Spanish Main. Its streets are lined with elegant houses of the nobility, who cling to the lifestyle of old Spain. Its treasury is filled with gold and silver from Peru. Its churches are ornamented with jewels, crucifixes, and altars of gold, all ripe to be seized by the buccaneers. Panama City is located on the Pacific coast of the isthmus. The Spaniards doubt that the buccaneers would cross the forbidding jungle to attack by land. But Morgan will prove them wrong. They travel up the river Chagres in small boats. But the water is low, and after 3 days the men are forced to leave the boats behind. They will cross the remaining 50 miles on foot. Believing Spanish outposts will supply provisions, Morgan orders his men to travel light and leave their food behind. Forewarned, the Spaniards have stripped the land of food and livestock. Morgan's army hacks its way through the jungle, weak with hunger. They stumble forward. Their crude animal skin boots are soon torn from their feet. For more than 8 days, they are scorched by sun, drenched by rain, tormented by mosquitoes. Only Morgan's iron will drives his weak and exhausted men toward Panama. On the 9th day, they reach deliverance.
Desperately hungry, they staggered out onto an open field. There, great herds of cattle were grazing. Esquemeling was there. The animals were hacked up and thrown, dripping with blood, onto the fire to cook. The meat scarcely had time to get hot before they grabbed it and began gnawing. They more resembled cannibals than Europeans at this banquet. Blood many times running down from their beards onto their bodies. Gorged with the rarest of beef, the buccaneers were ready to fight.
The men of Panama, poorly armed and ill-trained, are deployed on a plain outside the city. At the vanguard is their viceroy, mounted on horseback. Behind him is his secret weapon, a herd of oxen and bulls. As the buccaneers approach, the viceroy calls out,
"Come, hombres. There is no other remedy now but to conquer or die."
Morgan puts his buccaneer sharpshooters in the vanguard. They quickly send the Spanish cavalry into disarray. Without a second to lose, the viceroy unleashes the oxen and bulls toward the buccaneers. But the animals turn and stampede, trampling what's left of the hapless defenders. When the battle is over, some 500 Spanish are dead or wounded. Just 15 buccaneers have fallen. Panama is Morgan's. But a Spanish captain has been ordered to burn the city if there is no hope of saving it. 200 barrels of gunpowder explode in flame. The buccaneers are outraged. Every burning house means the loss of valuables. In Morgan's words,
There we were, forced to put out the fire of the enemy's houses. But it was in vain, for by 12 that night it was all consumed. That famous and ancient city of Panama.
For 20 days, the buccaneers picked through the ruins. But Panama's greatest treasures have been loaded onto galleons. Women and children have fled.
They scoured the countryside for captives. Each day, half-starved men, women, and children were dragged back into the city, where many of them were tortured, mutilated, and hung up in trees, all to get them to give information about their few pitiful possessions.
Legend holds that the buccaneers overlooked this ornate gold-covered altar because the priests and nuns painted it brown to look like wood. No matter how they were tortured, none would reveal the secret.
In the end, the yield per pirate was only $100, and this from the richest city in the New World.
Panama lies in ruins. The Spanish ambassador writes to his queen.
In short, Your Highness, this kingdom is in the most lamentable condition that you could possibly imagine. The citizens are naked, poor, without food, and all sick. There have been so many deaths since the invasion.
To appease Spain and prevent war, Henry Morgan is arrested and taken to England. One item of plunder may have redeemed him in the eyes of his king.
This is the original copy of Morgan's greatest prize, a cruising guide to the Pacific. It's one of Spain's greatest secrets. It was captured by one of Morgan's men amidst the rubble of Panama. It gives the English for the first time information about ports, rivers, harbors, fortifications, everything the English need to know that would help them break the monopoly the Spanish have of information about the Pacific Ocean.
In time, King Charles II sees Morgan as a resource instead of a nuisance, and seeks his counsel on Caribbean affairs. In an amazing reversal of luck, Morgan is knighted. At last, he is Sir Henry Morgan. The man who first came to Jamaica as a soldier of fortune returns as lieutenant governor. He retires to his plantation, a wealthy man. The island is a changed place. The days of privateering passed. But Morgan is grim and haunted. According to his personal physician, Morgan is much given to drinking and sitting up late.
What drove him to drink? Memories of 1,000 homes in ashes? Men, women, and children screaming in the night? He is a governor, a knight of the realm. But by what dark compact did he achieve it? His drunken binges led to his removal from office. Henry Morgan died at 53, and so travelled one last time to his own heart of darkness.
Four years later, in 1692, a long, lingering tremor rocks Port Royal. The earthquake destroys the city, and the body of Henry Morgan is reclaimed by the sea.
In the dim twilight of the ocean bed, little remains of what was once the most wicked city on earth. From pirate and proper folk alike, the devil always took his due. Those buccaneers who survived disappeared in the bays, keys, and jungles of the Caribbean. They had raided in the name of God and country. Now they were simply outlaws, unneeded and unwanted. But how long before the powers that be would call for the brethren again? I don't know. How long does it take the moon to rise, the tide to shift, or the wind to blow again?